Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eiichi Shibusawa, and thank you very much for the very large attendance today. A lot of distinguished guests today, and thank you very much for giving the opportunity to speak. It's great to be back in Southern California. Actually, I went to business school at UCLA back in '86, '87, and so it's like coming home back home. And another coincidence is that my wife was actually not made in Japan, but she was made actually in Glendale. She was born in Glendale, and until 2 years old, she was in Glendale, and she gave me the address of where she used to live, and thanks to Google Map, 815 East Maple Street. And the same apartment was still there, and there was a black and white photo of my wife when she was a little baby, and the same pool was actually still there. So I'm very, very thrilled to be here with you today, and the honor to be with you. This gentleman, you probably met before, and I haven't met him either, but this is my grandfather's grandfather, Eiichi Shibusawa. He passed away in 1931. I was born in 1961, so there's a 30-year gap. He's known as the father of Japanese capitalism because he was involved in starting 500 companies, and as Vicken mentioned, 600 social welfare enterprises. This is the Eiichi Shibusawa that most people actually see as an old man, but actually he used to be young. and he looked like this back, this was like, I think he was like 26, 27 years old. And this is when he had the opportunity to travel to Paris for the exposition in 1867, 68, in the transformation. And so this was the era when Japan was emerging from a feudal state to the modernization. He sent this picture to his wife in Japan, and she got really mad. Said, "What did you do with your hair?" And there's actually a letter at the Memorial Foundation. There's an archive of him explaining to his wife why he did this. And so he was a great man, but there's always the better half, right? That's always, and that things doesn't change. So anyway. Let me share with you a little bit about some origins. In Japan, maybe some of you have been there, but Tokyo Chuoku Nihonbashi Kabutocho 43. And if you go to this address right now, there's a nondescript sort of regular building that stands there, but on the corner there's a plate there, and it says something like this in Japanese, obviously, but it says the bank's birthplace. The same exact space, about 145 years ago, this was the building that stood there. This is the first National Bank of Japan, which my great-great-grandfather was credited for establishing. We don't look very much alike, but my sister looks like this, so I think we're related. But he kind of had a problem because, like, a bank didn't exist back those days. And so if you think about it, it was a startup venture business. And so to explain what a bank was to the Japanese society, he said something like this. He said, the bank is like a mighty river. Money that doesn't gather there is merely a puddle of water or dripping dewdrop. So even though it has the ability to bring wealth to the people in the nation, its effects are unrealized. And so basically, money is a very important resource, but if it's just dripping, it has not much power behind it. But if you gather and if it starts to flow like a large river, then obviously there's power behind it, and that's basically led to the modernization of Japan. And so when you hear the word capitalist or capitalism in the sort of modern era, usually we don't have a sort of a positive spin on it. We kind of imagine the have and the have-nots, the 1% and that kind of. But he kind of had a different sort of notion of what a capitalist or what the importance of capitalism to the modernization of a society. But if you think about it, how does dewdrops that are dropping all over the place, and how does that gather together, and basically, I think you need some. In Japanese we call it kyokan, but in English you can probably translated in common values. Common values that are shared by people, and if it's shared by people, they come together. And so tonight, we all gathered together for some common values, and that's why we had a busy schedule, but we gathered here today. Money gathers at a bank because we want to put our money in a safe place. That's why it gathers at a bank. I used to work for a hedge fund. Money that gathered there was, for rich people that want to get richer, right? But you needed some common values to bring sort of these, the dewdrops together. But if it gathers together, though, there's strengths and weaknesses and things like that. And so I think you need mutual engagement to help one another. And if you think about it, this common values and mutual engagement, in a sense, that's what kind of makes us human, in a sense, right? And this is, I think we mentioned the word humanity. We think about what humanity is all about, and I think we all share some common values, whether, as Vicken said, if you're a Buddhist or Christian or Islam or whatever, there is some common values. And then if you're able to have mutual engagement, then that's how you build a society. And once you do that, well, we can co-create, have the co-creation. And so my great-grandfather's vision about bringing capitalism into Japan was to bring wealth and bring power to the nation, but he wanted to do this through what it says gappon. Gappon in Japanese kind of means unity was the word I think Vicken used. It's a kind of unity of these kind of engagements. And so it wasn't just about making the money for him as a capitalist. And so this is the first bank in Japan, right, the first venture, but he also is involved in many other enterprises. He established the first, I guess in a sense, large-scale manufacturing. This is the OG paper, which he introduced Western manufacturing know-how into Japan for Westernized paper manufacturing. He also introduced the first insurance company in Japan. And also a shipping company that he merged with they usually called him the arch rivals, Mr. Iwasaki of the Mitsubishi, but they actually, these two companies eventually merged into a shipping company. The first gas company, this was, I think was the first, it was a textile company. Beer. He liked beer, I guess. So a lot of beer companies. And if you travel to Japan, there's a hotel called the Imperial Hotel in central Tokyo, and he was involved in establishing that. And he was also involved in establishing the Tokyo Stock Exchange in Japan. And so about 500 sort of business-related enterprises. But other than that, universities such as Hitotsubashi University. He was also a champion of women's education back in about 100 years ago. And he also established the Japan Chamber of Commerce in Japan, hospitals, JK Hospital. He was involved in the Red Cross in Japan. Yoi Queen, actually, he was the sort of the head of this organization until he passed away in 1931. But back in 150 years ago, even in central Tokyo, there were actually street children, homeless. So this was a facility for the underprivileged. He was also a champion of U.S.-Japan relations. He came to Japan 4 times. First was in 1902, 1909, and 1910s, and then last 1926, which was 5 years before he passed away at the age of 91. So he was pretty old, actually, when he came. And he didn't get to travel first class in an airplane because airplane didn't exist. He had to take a ship. And so it was a sort of physical toll, but he felt that establishing Japan and U.S. relationship was a very important effort. The picture here, actually, is a very famous project that he was involved in. It was sending dolls as ambassadors, and so from the United States they sent blue-eyed dolls to Japan. From Japan they sent these Japanese kimono dolls to the United States as ambassadors. Apparently they even carried a passport. I don't know if it's issued by the consulate, but there was that kind of exchange. And then, as Vicken got in detail, he was involved in the Armenian Relief Society. I don't have much data as like Vicken, but this is an English paper that I found, and there's an article here that says basically like this. It says the Relief Committee entertains press. Basically, he was advocating that more Japanese people know about this tragedy in Armenia. So basically, he invited the press, and to make sure that they knew what was going on, and to engage the Japanese society. So his thing was not, he obviously had a little bit of money, so he could donate, but it was more like a seed capital, because he was basically like a venture capitalist. So basically, he puts up a little money, and then he engages a lot of people, and that was the dropping dewdrop, and then it becomes one mighty river. As can mention, he was a student of Confucius. In the United States, you think of Confucius as something in a Chinese a cookie, but it basically it represents virtue. And then the soroban, which is the first handheld calculator, basically, and it represents business, and then that this should be in sync. And his thinking was that Dongo, the teachings of Confucius, and the abacus, soroban, together, why does that need to go together? Basically, he's saying, this is from his teachings, basically his top management may become very wealthy individually, but if most of that society suffers in poverty, then his own happiness will not last. He also said something like this: if that wealth is not achieved through the right way of doing things, then that wealth cannot last. And that is why it's so important for us today to make efforts to merge Rongo and Soroban, which even, obviously in back those days, it seems so far apart. And so for my interpretation of his way of thinking in today's language is basically it's all about sustainability. How do you have a sustainable society into the future? And part of that equation is, I think, inclusion, which obviously is a very big topic today. And so in today's society, we think about the digital economy. And digital basically says 0 or 1, basically, right? Black or white. And it's an important way of looking at it. But his way of thinking, as I thinking, is more about the power of and, which is it's not always the easiest answer, because it's not so clear. But from this power of and, that's where you get the innovation. That's where you get the new creativity and sustainability into the future. So, in closing though, I kind of wanted to share with you this picture. Sometimes we wake up in the morning and it kind of feels like this. It's like this. It's like this upward climb, endless climb, right? And you look around, the rocks everywhere, right? Kind of feels that way, right? But this very same sort of existence, if you actually look at it from a different perspective, you see a different picture. If you look at it closely, all you see is a hill, endless hill, and all you see is rocks. But if you look at it from a different angle, you see this. That was actually Mount Fuji, and which is very symmetrical, right? But if you think about it, if you look at it in a different times of the day, if you look at it at a different season, you see different perspectives, new sort of vision, and this is a very important message that actually was taught to me by a Chinese student about 10 years ago. I started helping out this project called the Jingu Forum, which was a forum of students that started in 2006, so about 12 years ago. There's this University of Tokyo co-ed girl, and there's this Beijing guy. And back in 2006, Japan and China kind of went through a rough spot. And they basically said, we can't leave it up to adults anymore, right? So we're going to change. And so this kind of started, and it's been going on every year. About the second year, I remember the leader of the Chinese delegation, they came to Japan, had some discussions, and he made a statement that really left an impression on me. He said, history is like a mountain. It never changes. But, he added, but if you look at the mountain from this side and the other side, you see a different picture. I mean, even Mount Fuji, which is very symmetrical, if you look from the different sides, you kind of see a different mountain. History is never symmetrical. So if you look at it from the different sides, you see a different picture. It's the same thing. And so what he was saying is maybe sometimes we need to go on the other side of the mountain and to see what it looks like. And I thought that was a very, very powerful statement that was sent to me by somebody like, very, very younger than me. Sometimes we forget, because our daily lives, we only see rocks and an upward climb. But if you think about it in a different perspective, in a sense, we don't live in a bad world after all. I get to come to Southern California because we live in a world that allows me to do that, to spend time with you. And so I really wanted to appreciate the opportunity to be here today with you, all the delegates, distinguished guests, the Consul General, especially Vicken, for finding this wonderful story, which I did not know until 6 months ago. And so if it wasn't for Vicken, I wouldn't be here with you today. And especially I wanted to thank Vicken for his fine work. So I wanted to applaud Vicken one more time for his fine work. Thank you so much. Thank you. And please, if you're ever in Tokyo, I would love to take you to see Mount Fuji. So see you then. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you for an excellent summary of the incredible things your great-great-grandfather accomplished and the philosophy that made that possible. And then the last story, and I like that photo, so we're going to leave it up. Before we start Q&A, one last reminder to write your questions on the card, and hopefully lots of you have written them. Otherwise, I'm going to have to tap dance up here. Before we move on to Q&A, there's going to be a brief but important comments from the ANCA. Please welcome Mr. Maurice Missak Kelechian to the podium.